All right, today we're talking about some of the really resilient, amazing people that I knew as a young man growing up here in Dunnellon. Today we're going to talk about Garland Red Hayes. He was born on June 30th, 1918 here in Dunnellon. He lived the entirety of his life here. I knew him from probably about the age in his 50s when I was born, and he lived in the same house until he passed away in the 1990s. I knew him the entirety of the time. Well, just a fascinating, fine Southern gentleman. He's also he was kind of a high energy guy. You know, he wasn't low key by any means. Mr. Hayes was the fire chief here for about 30 years. Just a very active man. The story, and he told me many, it was just fascinating from the era that he grew up. The one story that always stuck with me was the first job that he had. He was a newlywed, and he had moved into his house that his parents had built on 2nd Avenue, where he lived the entirety of his life in that same house. The first job he took during the height of the Great Depression, when work was just not to be found. He was able to find a job pulling deadhead lumber out of the Withlacoochee River back behind me here. And as he told me the story, it always stuck with me for several reasons. One is just the amount of hazard and danger involved with the job. They had a barge parked in the river right on the corner of the bend behind us. Now, the reason the logs were there is the lumber mill, all the way back into the 1890s, was in the middle of town. They would cut the trees down and float them down the river, and they backed them up from about where the Highway 41 bridge is, and they pulled them out at the site that is now the Blue Gator. They hauled them up to the top of the hill where the sawmill was. So there was a reason that all the sinker cypress was backed up there on that corner. Now, he told me during the 30s that he came to work in the morning and they had the barge there, but that was before any kind of scuba or underwater breathing apparatus. Their method for pulling those logs up was to hang a logging chain over his shoulder, catch his breath, and jump over, swim down in 12 or 14 foot of water, try and wrap the logging chain around the log, and then come back up when he ran out of breath. That's not very hard to realize. That is super, super dangerous work. So he did it for the half a day. The gentleman that he had hired him. He worked until lunchtime, and he went home, and he told his newlywed wife, "That's the only available job in Dunnellon, and I'm not going back to work." He said, "I'd rather be unemployed and us go hungry than go back and finish my day." So I wrote that for the newspaper. Well, that's the first column that I ever wrote for the newspaper back in the day, and I named it the 40-year lunch break. Mr. Hayes said he knew the gentleman that ran that barge the rest of his life. He said he never asked for his half-day's pay, and there was never anything said about him not returning after lunch because he quit the job. It was understood that he chose to not drown in the river with a logging chain over a job that wasn't worth it even during the middle of the Great Depression. That's just a story that always stuck with me. Now, in about the 1995, I bought my first scuba tanks, and I dove the site, and it was exactly as he described it from the 30s. The trees were massive. I don't know, it would almost take 2 grown men to wrap your arms around each log. They were so long and it was dark, you couldn't see the ends of them. And they were piled just like in a massive pile of like twigs or pixie sticks. They were just massive pile. It was really daunting to dive it with a tank. I didn't have an octopus regulator, so it was it was dangerous me diving alone without an octopus regulator if something bad happened. And to think about doing that with a logging chain holding your breath was just mind-boggling to me. Around the year 2000, 1997 to 2000, a logging company came in. They pulled them out. They actually pulled them out from the slot over here. And they were, at that time, they're about $1,000 a piece. They're probably many thousands of dollars a piece for that old growth cypress now, if you can even find it. So that's the story. They're gone now. The story is lost unless I tell you the logs are flooring in multi-million-dollar houses somewhere. Well, that's the story of Red Hayes and his first job and the 40-year lunch break.